we have talked about matching so far and fair division, and today we are going to start a new set of topics related to voting. The cool thing about this module is that voting is really the core problem of social choice. So this is where social choice really begins. Okay, and as hopefully you will be able to see, matching and fair division and a whole bunch of other social choice problems, they can actually just be seen as specific instantiations of voting. Okay, so this is the most general framework of thinking about preference aggregation problems, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so I hope you have seen this and remember this picture from before, lecture 1, which is that of a voting rule, right? So this just describes a cartoon representation of a voting problem, where on the input end you have a bunch of voters or agents who have preferences over some alternatives, and a voting rule is a mechanism to aggregate these preferences in order to make one collective decision as to like who is the election winner, for example. Okay, so this is how any social choice problem, and in particular any voting problem, looks like. And as I mentioned before, voting is not just limited to political elections, right? It shows up in all sorts of applications like online recommendation systems, even Google's algorithm for ranking pages. It's nothing but a voting rule. It decides that this candidate slash page is the most important, this candidate slash page is the second most important, and so on. Okay, so under the hood, it's really just a preference aggregation function. And the formal setup, again, I won't be too mathematical, but really somewhat more concretely, the setup is the following. Okay, so you're given a bunch of voters, V1 up to V5, let's say in this case, and every voter has a preference ranking over the candidates. Okay, so candidates in this case are these circles, these 4 colored circles, and every voter has a ranking of these 4 circles, and these rankings could be same or different, doesn't really matter. Okay, so this is the input to our voting problem. Okay, for today I'll assume that there are no ties in preferences, so these are strict rankings, and these are also complete rankings, so nothing is omitted from the ranking. Okay, so if you have 4 candidates, every voter gives you a ranking of 4 things. Okay, alright. And the job of a voting rule is just to map any such input into one winning candidate. Okay, so this thing on the left hand side is what we call a preference profile, right, or an input to a voting rule, and the output is just one winning candidate. Okay. For today, I'm just going to assume that we'll just be looking at single winner voting rules. Voting is much more general than that, okay, and I'll give you some examples later on, but for our discussion, let's just assume that you have rankings and these are all mapped to a single winning candidate. Okay? Is it clear what the function of a voting rule is? Alright. Okay, so for those who arrived late, let me just recall. So we are starting a new module on voting, okay, and the setup is that you have a bunch of voters, V1 up to V5, let's say, and you have a bunch of candidates given by these colored circles. Every voter has a ranking over these candidates, a strict and a complete ranking, and a voting rule maps all these rankings together into some winning candidate, okay, some election winner. That's the problem. Okay. Like I said, today we are just going to look at single winner rules, but voting is a much more general and much more broadly applicable problem, because when you talk about voting, right, the preferences could be in many different forms. For example, instead of giving rankings, the input might be in the form of ratings, right? 1-star candidate, 2-star candidate, 5-star candidate, and so on, right? Preferences would also be in the form of approvals or disapprovals, like, dislike preferences, right? You may not be able to rank all the movies on IMDb, but you can say, okay, I like these 10 movies and others I don't care about, right? Things like that. I mean, the references can have very, very complex structure, but for us today, we'll just assume that preferences are given by these nice, clean, strict rankings, okay? Likewise, the output of a voting rule can also be complex. So we are going to focus on single winners, but in general, voting rules can also be used to elect multiple winners or a committee of candidates. and we'll talk about these kind of voting rules later on. You can also imagine the voting rules being used to find a ranking over candidates, right? Which is the topmost, which is the second, and so on. Did you answer your question? Okay, all right. Okay, so you can desire various kinds of outputs from voting rules. Today we will just look at rankings as inputs and a single winning candidate as output. Okay, and we'll come to some of these other things in the next few lectures. Okay. Is the basic setup clear? Yeah.
Have you discussed how we choose the winner?
That's what this lecture is about.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Alright. Okay, so this is the focus for today. Alright. So let's start with this simple setting. Suppose you just have two candidates. Okay? And say a bunch of voters. Right? How do you think a candidate should be chosen? Sorry, who?
Majority vote.
Majority vote, right? I mean, nothing else makes sense, right? That's the only reasonable thing to do, right? You have a red candidate, a blue candidate. If more voters like red over blue, then you pick red, otherwise you pick blue. That's the sort of the brain dead thing that you could do in this case, right? So as someone also identified today, it's the majority voting rule, okay? And whenever you see two candidates, just close your eyes and apply majority, okay? That's the only sensible thing that you can do with two candidates, okay? Anyone who thinks something else can be done? Yes?
US electoral system.
So how would that be different from majority here?
I mean, basically, it's
Oh, you mean dividing into states and then collecting? Okay, yeah, I don't know. So in our setup, let's say the input is just rankings and you just collect them in one go and find a single winner. Okay, yeah. And let's not go into this. That will just break the class entirely. Okay. So suppose you have more than two candidates, right? I think it's fairly easy to see that majority may not be applicable anymore, right? No single candidate may have a majority of votes. So what should we do now?
So even with two candidates, there can be a tie.
Yeah, so with two candidates there can be a tie, in which case you use some tie-breaking procedure, right? So throughout this lecture, I'm going to be quiet in terms of tie-breaking. I'll assume that there is some tie-breaking already defined, okay? But whenever I talk about a voting rule, you should know that there is some tie-breaking associated with it, right? So you could break ties, for example, just by looking at names of the candidates in a lexicographic order, right? So say someone whose name starts with S, right? If they are tied with someone whose name starts with R, then R wins. Okay. I didn't choose you just for this example, but fine. Okay. You could also just toss a coin, right? If there's three candidates who are tied, who is the winner? Just toss a three-sided fair coin. Right? And there could be a bunch of other ways. So tie-breaking is a very, very important issue. It actually has some important effects on the economic properties, also the computational properties of voting rules. But I'm going to sort of push all that under the carpet for today's lecture. I'll assume that tie-breaking rules are well defined. We'll just talk about the core voting rules. Okay. Now, suppose you have three or more candidates. How do you decide a winner?
When you're talking about the vote, you mean the highest preference of any candidate, right?
So vote, like I said, are rankings over complete rankings over the candidate.
Each voter is just giving a vote to like the first choice of rank. Right?
It's a ranking. So suppose there are 5 candidates who are running. Every voter gives you a ranking of these 5.
So when you said that majority votes wouldn't work here when they're doing more into candidates, what do you mean like by vote?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. What does majority even mean? If you have more than 2 people.
Yeah, we are just considering the top preference of each voter.
That is what I was thinking.
Okay, so then what is the voting rule that you're thinking about? So you are given a bunch of rankings, you look at everyone's top placed candidates and decide based on that.
If I just know the top best, like if I just have that information, then I would just choose the maximum occurring element.
Makes sense, right? If you just have that information, then it makes sense to pick the one that occurs the most frequently in the first position. Okay, will such a candidate be preferred by 50% of the voters always? No, right? Okay, then what do we do? I mean, sure, this is one thing and we'll talk about that voting rule. But is that the only thing that can be done? Because it looks like it's discarding a lot of information, right?
So
So voters are giving you very complicated rankings. You're saying, no, I don't need that. I just need your favorites, and I'll decide based on that. Jatin?
So one not so bad idea is just compare pairwise every two candidates.
Okay.
And then you form a tournament and you pick a king in that tournament.
Okay, so does everyone know what a tournament is? Not cricket tournament, which is going on, but in a graph theoretic sense. Everyone knows what a tournament graph is? Okay, so those who don't know, it's just a complete directed graph. So between every pair of vertices, there is an edge in one direction or the other. Okay, so you don't skip anything. Now Jatin is saying, okay, let's pick any pair of candidates. Let's do head-to-heads, right? Let's see if more voters prefer this candidate to that, right? In that case, you draw an arrow in one direction, otherwise you draw an arrow in the other direction, right? So now this gives you a tournament graph, and then do what?
Pick a king.
Pick a king. Okay.
Distance less than equal to.
Source or sink, right? Like the same.
Source or sink, does it exist?
Yeah,
No.
it doesn't exist.
It may not exist.
Our text from which everyone has reachable within distance to.
Yes. So now Jatin is using some very cool graph theoretic terms to scare everyone. It's called it's called a king vertex. Okay, so this is a vertex that may not beat you directly, but it beats you through someone. So either it beats you directly, or there is someone who it beats that beats you. Do you understand correctly? Okay. So it turns out that a vertex that beats everybody may not exist, but this king vertex always exists. Okay.
Highest degree. Highest degree.
Or you could look at highest degree vertices. Okay. Any other suggestions? So this is a very complicated graph theoretic idea of doing voting.
We could assign points to each.
You could assign points, right? What could be simpler? So how do you assign points?
If you have the first preference on somebody, maybe you get 1 point. If you have the second preference, then you get 0.5 or something like that.
Okay, so some decreasing point system, and then
you
who's the
add
winner?
all
You just add the points.
well.
Right? So if I am a candidate that gets 1 point from say Vedant's vote, 0 from Mayank because he does not like me, right? And things like that, I just add up my scores. And if my score is the highest among all candidates, then I win. Okay, so things like that, and we will see a voting rule that does exactly that. So these are all named voting rules. I'm glad you're coming up with those on your own. Good. Anything else? So we have had first place things. We have had graph theory. We have had point systems. What else?
And we can do that. I guess the most obvious thing, like you compare the first preferences. If whoever ties at the first preference, then you compare the second preference. Like
Okay.
you compare
So
the second preferences of people.
it's lexicographic in the preference positioning sense. So if there is a candidate who is a clear winner in terms of first positions, choose it.
This can also be achieved using the same point system, right? Have like exponential points.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Geometry.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Interesting. Anything else?
Look at people who, instead of looking at the best person, you can try and look at people who are favored the least and eliminate them.
Who have the smallest support and knock them off,
Yeah.
and then look at the residual election, and then maybe iteratively knock off people with low support, and hopefully you'll end up with something who is well supported or well accepted. Excellent. Okay, we'll talk about that as well. Okay, very nice. What else?
For the king vertex one in the graph, is it like, I don't think it's necessary for there to be only one king there.
Okay.
There can be multiple kings, how do you decide?
Okay, so Jatin will tell us how to decide. Some tie breaking rule, right? So very often in voting it helps, even with these score based ideas, very often you'll see that candidates get tied, and you inevitably have to use some kind of tie breaking. Good for you, I won't get into tie breaking today, so I'll assume it's defined in the back end. We'll just talk about the voting rule definition. Okay, yes.
Instead of fixing that the first person gets 1 and second gets 0.5, every person basically gives every candidate some marks, and the sum is normalized and based on that.
So the points are voted not on positions but to candidates.
You get one, basically every person gets 1 vote and he can divide it like
Interesting. Good. So now we are talking money. I like that. So I think what Divyansh might be thinking is that let's say everyone has a virtual currency of 1 rupee, and you have to divide that 1 rupee between the candidates. So if I like some candidate rate a lot, I'll put say 0.9 rupees on that. Some less preferred candidate, I spend say 10 paisa and so on. Right? Someone who's indifferent might do like 0.5, 0.5 or whatever. It's like an economist's market-based solution, which I really like. Fantastic. Okay, now what do you do?
So the higher the marks.
The one who gets the most money inflow from the voters is probably the one who voters like the most. And okay, interesting. Jatin, you were saying?
Does not apply in this model. Right? This is a rankings model.
This is a rankings model, exactly. So you need more refined information in that, but point taken. Okay, yes.
Isn't this like kind of related to strategy proof? Less strategy proof because voters will be more inclined.
Exactly. So now Rahul is thinking, okay, there's a dozen voting rules that we have proposed. Which is the best one, right? We'll talk about that question today and tomorrow and in the next not tomorrow. I mean in the next lecture and the one after that and the one after that, because this is a question that people have struggled with for a long time. Okay, you may not like the answers. But I'll share with you whatever is known. So this is exactly what is motivating. What is the motivating question for these kind of lectures? Okay, it's not to impress you with the fact that there is 100 voting rules out there. It is to understand how to compare these voting rules because they all seem reasonable, right? You all came up with it. I'm sure you thought there was something reasonable about one voting rule compared to the others, but which is the best, right? So we'll talk a lot about that. And study preferences will be sort of one very useful benchmark. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, like we discussed that with two candidates, it's not clear what majority means, right? Because now there's multiple pairs of candidates, so it's not as clear how to decide a winner. So what I'll do is I'll just throw a bunch of names at you in this lecture, a bunch of voting rules, many of which you have already discovered, okay? And you'll see that all of these make sense in different settings, but all of these also have their own flaws. Okay? And this is just to motivate that we need a systematic framework to compare all of these things. Okay? So let's first become familiar with what kind of rules are out there and what are the good things and bad things about them. Okay? So the first rule I want to talk about is plurality. Right? Anyone knows what it does? You've already mentioned this rule. I just want to know if you can associate the name with what it does. Have people heard this term before?
I heard singularity.
Singularity, oh, that's a different course. Okay, so in the context of two candidates, majority means you have at least a 50% support from the voters. Plurality means you have higher support than anyone else. Okay? So it means that you just look at the first place ranks of the votes and you look at the candidate who occurs the most frequently in just those first places. Discard the rest of the rankings. Okay? So as before, you have an input given like this, right? The voting rule plurality says that you look at the candidate who has the most first place finishes, right? So just look at this top row, ignore the rest, and figure out who is the most supported candidate. And in this case, it is what? It is red, right? So red is first place for two voters, so its plurality score is 2. For all other candidates, the score is 1 because it has the highest score. That's why it's a plurality winner. So you can think of plurality also in terms of the scoring idea, where every voter is giving 1 point to rank 1 and 0 to all the rest. And the highest score candidate wins. Yeah? So fairly simple. Again, just want to make a cautionary remark that although I'm defining voting rules this way, there is always a tie-breaking sort of hidden underneath, okay? But I'm not diving too deep into that, but just know that there are various ways of defining tie-breaking rules, okay? Either lexicographic or coin tossing or whatever, okay? Good. So the problem with plurality, I mean, it's a very easy to explain rule, but the problem is that sometimes the plurality winner might be disliked by more than 50% of the voters compared to some other candidate, right? For example, here the plurality winner is red, right? But if you look at how the voters compare red with, let's say, green, right? So V1 and V2, they both prefer red over green, but all the other voters, they prefer green over red. So more than 50% of your electorate, they dislike the winner that you have chosen using plurality. They'd rather have green as the winner. Right? So although plurality seems very reasonable, you're looking at the candidate with the highest support in the top ranks, it may not be popular among the majority of voters. Okay? And someone brought up US politics, so just want to throw it in there. Okay? So very reasonable rule, but it has a very obvious flaw. But anyway, because this tool is so simple to explain and understand, it's used very, very widely in political elections all over the world. So it's used, in America, in African countries, and of course here in India, right? So we always pick the party or the candidate with the most first place finishes. So yes.
How do we define plurality? If you have to give it a definition in some sentences.
Yeah, so given as input the rankings, you look at the candidate who's rank 1 for the highest number of voters.
Candidate who has ranked 1 by the highest number of voters.
So you just look at the top row, ignore the rest of the data, and the candidate that has the most appearances in the top row is the plurality level. Okay? Yeah?
In India, as well as the US, like currently not using plurality because it's necessary to have majority in plurality to win. So
I'm talking about city level elections.
sure.
Yeah, not the Lok Sabha level elections. Okay. Okay. And this is just a sort of a snapshot. So plurality is used all over the place because it's such a natural thing, right? That's the first thing you would come up with when you have to do voting, right? Okay. So here's another voting rule. It's called the Borda Count. It's named after this guy, Jean-Charles de Borda. He was a French dude in the 1700s. Okay, and he was famous for many, many things. Okay, he was of course doing maths. Okay, but he was also into traveling. He liked to go on sea expeditions. Okay, sorry. Yes, and he was also into measurements, into devising instruments that were used to measure lengths or angles, etc. In fact, when the quantity meter was being standardized, a lot of measurements were done, in preparation for that, and he was involved with many of those experiments. In fact, he popularized meter in France and more broadly in Europe. So he was fairly tech guy. Okay. Thankfully for us, he gave us this nice voting rule, which again you guys came up with, and this is a points-based or a score-based voting rule. It says that once again every voter has a ranking, but this time we'll not discard the rest of the preferences, right? We'll actually take everything into account. So suppose you have say m candidates, then for every voter the first placed candidate gets m minus 1 points. Second guy gets m minus 2 points, m minus 3, and so on, and the last guy gets 0 points. Okay, it has this linear kind of a scoring system. Okay, and for any candidate, you add up the points it gets from each voter, and the one with the highest score wins. Okay, again subject to some tiebreaking. Okay, all right. So who's the Borda winner here? Who is the Borda winner here? Okay, so let's do it step by step. Okay, so let's look at red. What is its Borda score?
3 and
Overall.
6.
Overall.
3 and 0, 6.
3 from here, 3 from here, nothing from here. So 6 points. Okay. All right. What about green? 9. Everyone agrees? Yeah. Okay, and so on and so forth, right? So you tally the Borda points for everyone, and you see that green happens to have the highest score, so it is the Borda. Okay, fairly simple, very natural rule. Okay, good. Now I have to point out flaws in every voting rule, so I'll keep doing that. So one flaw with Borda is that it's susceptible to strategic behavior from the voters. Okay, in other words, it's not a strategy-proof voting rule. Okay, By that we mean that suppose you are a voter under Borda, there will exist scenarios where you see a candidate who's elected and then you think, hey, wait a minute, maybe if I give a different ranking, right, the outcome will change so that according to my true ranking, I like the new candidate better compared to the old one. Okay? So there exists some bad input where this can happen. Okay? I hope everyone remembers manipulation and surreptitiousness. Okay? Good. So let's see an example. Okay? Suppose you're voter V1. Okay? And you see that currently green is the Borda winner, but you don't really like green. It's your third favorite candidate, right? You like red and blue more. So what you'll do is maybe you can just pretend that you like yellow more than green. Okay, that will lower the score of green, increase the score of yellow. Yeah. And lo and behold, it creates a tie. Right? And maybe the tie breaking rule is such that it favors your favorite candidate compared to the one that you don't like.
And also switch red and blue as well.
You can switch, you can do other things as well. Yeah. Right? So if you happen to know the preferences of all other voters and if you happen to know the internal workings of the voting rule, including the description of tie breaking, there exist scenarios where you can exploit that. Okay?
But
Yes.
I did not get, like, what is the manipulation here? Like,
The manipulation
the
is-
first voter clearly likes yellow more than green, right? If it is
Yeah, so-
okay with yellow winning.
So the manipulation, so this is your true ranking.
Yeah.
Currently green is winning. Now I'm asking the question, can I report anything, any other ranking, such that a more preferred candidate wins? According to my true ranking.
Okay, so blue might end up winning because of this.
Yes.
That is.
That's exactly what we're doing, right? So can I report something that will prompt the voting rule to select either red or blue, which will be beneficial for me? I don't care about other voters, right? I just care about my own preferences. So that's what we have done. We have shown that, okay, you can do this switch, and now blue is the voter winner, which I happen to like more in my true ranking. Okay, everyone happy? So when Borda proposed this rule, so actually Borda proposed this rule in the context of elections for the French Academy, I think, and he knew about this flaw. He knew that it was susceptible to manipulation, and his response was the following. He said, my scheme is intended only for honest men. Okay, now let's ignore the sexism in this quote. But even other than that, I think this is not the way how you deal with life's problems. Okay, so he's just saying that, okay, if honest people use my voting rule, then this problem won't arise. But that's exactly the problem that is happening. Okay.
Let's say even if we're honest, how good that result is.
Define good.
Yeah, so
Yeah. So there are many ways of defining good. More ways than you would like. Okay, we'll see some ways today, and I'll direct you to some other ways as part of your self-reading. Okay, but this question of which voting rule is the best, this is going to haunt us for the next few lectures. Okay, and we'll talk a lot about it.
And the earlier problem is also there in this rule, right?
Yeah.
That 50% of the...
Yeah. So this is not the only problem, but this is just a problem. Okay, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Good. But anyway, so again, I mean, for all its flaws, Borda Count is also used very, very widely, again, because it's such a natural rule, right? Again, you guys came up with it, right? So in particular, some of the blockbuster applications of Borda are this song competition called Eurovision. Have people heard of it? No? So this is something that is popular in Europe, I guess, where every country sends in an entry, right? And then they see who can sing and dance the best. And it's also used in this library OpenGL in deciding which features to be implemented in the next edition. Okay, so they actually do voting and give points to different features, and the winning feature gets sort of forwarded. All right. Okay. So these two were score-based systems, Plurality and Borda Count. Okay, I now want to talk about somewhat iterative style voting rules, right? That happen in steps, in stages. Okay. So the next voting rule is called plurality with runoff. So first of all, what is runoff? So runoff just means that it's in English. It just means that something that sort of runs away or flows away. Like sometimes during rains, water flows away because soil can't hold it. That's called a runoff. Okay, and really this idea of runoff also goes well in the context of voting, because when you do voting in stages, the votes or scores from previous rounds, they sort of flow into the next round, hence the name runoff. Okay. Alright. So the way this rule works is that first of all you see the word plurality. Let's do plurality, right? You see the rankings. You calculate the candidates' plurality scores, the number of first place finishes. Okay, you just compute all of the scores. Okay. For example, suppose I have an instance like this. So the numbers here mean how many voters have that preferences. So 2 voters have this ranking, 1 voter has that ranking, and so on. Okay. So first of all, this rule does plurality. Okay, so it computes the scores. What are the scores here of the different candidates? Can someone just shout out?
Red gets 3.
So what is that?
So first of all, I'll do plurality. I'll compute the plurality scores. You remember what it was, plurality? The first place finishes, right? So just look at these things. Ignore the rest.
So what was the number that these many voters have this?
2 voters have this ranking, 1 voter with this ranking, and so on.
9 would be.
So okay, what is? Yeah, let's go step by step. So let's look at red candidate. Okay, what is plurality score of red? 3, right? For green it's 2, yellow is 1, and purple is 1. Okay. So in this rule, you don't just select the candidate with highest plurality score in the first go. You select the top 2, because then you will do a head-to-head between them in the next round. Okay. So who are the top 2 here? Red and green, right? Because red has 3, green has 2. These are the ones with lowest plurality score, so you sort of discard them. Okay? So this is what you're left with after the first stage, right? And then in the next stage, you just do a head-to-head between these 2 candidates who came in from the first round. Okay? Now, whenever you see 2 candidates, you do majority, right? That's the light bulb answer. Okay, 2 candidates, do majority. Any voter that is not doing majority of 2 candidates is wrong. Okay, as simple as that. So now what do? Who is the winner? Green. Why? Because 3 voters prefer red over green and 4 voters prefer green over red. Yes? So note that let me just go back. So although red was plurality winner, green is plurality with runoff winner. So it's giving someone else a chance. Right? It's not discarding everything below this point. It's saying, okay, let me just see who is the next best and see how good that person is. Okay? It seems somewhat more inclusive, somewhat more fair voting rule. Okay? Is the definition clear? Yeah?
We can also say it's like plurality where we are considering the runner-up also.
Considering what?
Runner-up.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah. Okay. Anyone knows any application of this rule? Have you seen plurality with runoff in the news in the last few months? So there's a country in Europe whose political elections are decided that way. Sorry? Italy. Oh, I don't know how Italy elections are decided.
Yes, that is definitely like recent elections.
Okay. So in terms of French presidential elections are done this way, right? So first of all, they vote on a list of candidates, then 2 people are left, and then they do a runoff between them. All right. So speaking of presidents, here's one for the Indian president. It's called the single transferable vote, or STV. It's known by a bunch of other names it's also called instant runoff. I think it's also called alternative voting, and there's 100 other names. So this is a very nice voting rule in the sense that it again happens in stages. Okay? And the word transferable should give you a hint. It means that the support for a candidate sort of gets transferred across the stages. Okay? So let's see how it works.
Before that,
yeah.
So far the 4 types that we considered, including the majority. So in all of them, we can have ties, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the way STB works is that, again, it goes round by round. In each round, we are going to knock off a candidate whose plurality score is the lowest. So I think someone pointed out in our discussion that maybe you could eliminate candidates with the smallest support, and hopefully what you end up with is a good candidate. So that's what is happening here. Yeah? That you again compute plurality scores, knock off the one with the lowest, right? And transfer its support to the other in the next round. So what do we mean transfer? Let's see. So again, this is the instance. This is again the number of voters with that ranking. Okay. So let's compute the plurality scores here first. Which is the candidate with lowest plurality score?
Yellow.
Yellow, obviously, right? So let's remove yellow, right? But we are not going to throw away the votes of those who think yellow is the best. We are just going to say that these people, once yellow is gone, they are now supporting green in the residual election. Okay, that's what it means to transfer the support. Okay, so we're not discarding the votes; they are still there. It's just that the support changes. Okay, so you remove yellow, right? This is the new election. Now what do we do? Let's see. So now we have 3 candidates, and these are the first place positions. Red has 6, blue has 6, and green has 5. So green has the lowest support, lowest plurality score. So we knock off green now, right? Okay. So I think first I'm going to just combine those, and then we'll knock off green. Okay. Now what do we do? Majority. 2 candidates, you must do majority. So who wins? Yeah. Okay. So it just keeps eliminating candidates based on the plurality scores, and when you just have 2 candidates left, you do the most natural thing, you run majority. Yeah. Okay.
But sir,
yes.
in this, can I go back to the initial configuration? If the output of this round, like this voting was yellow, then majority prefers yellow over any other candidate. So like over the red.
So you're saying that if it happened that yellow was not the lowest plurality score?
If yellow had won, like if you had, like without doing any processing, we declare yellow as the winner. And now if we check, so many people prefer yellow over red.
So you're saying that the STB winner may not be a majority favorite?
So many people prefers yellow over red, yellow over blue and yellow over green. So majority of people prefer yellow over every single other color.
Yes. Good. So now you're thinking in terms of pairwise comparisons, right? You're comparing yellow versus this candidate, yellow versus that candidate. So you're doing pairwise comparisons.
Yeah.
We'll discuss pairwise comparisons in just a second. Yeah. But you're absolutely right that yellow seems to be a very natural candidate to pick because it's winning all of its pairwise comparisons, but STB is not doing that.
And again,
the majority issue is there.
And again, if 2 of them have the same plurality score, we again choose any random.
Again, I'm assuming that all those things are defined. So whenever there are ties, we have a rule that if there is a tie between red and blue, you pick blue, and so on. So all those rules are sort of buried under the behind the slides.
That can change.
That can change. That can have drastic consequences, both in terms of the economic properties, in terms of computational properties, and whatnot. Okay, so I'm making a sort of a serious leap of faith here by not giving you tie-breaking rules. But I want us to first understand voting and then get into the other details. Okay. All right. So everyone happy with how STB works? Yes.
So we have discussed the problem with the plurality with runoff.
Do you think any problems? You see any problems? Okay, it's a good exercise. Can you spot some problems with plurality with runoff? Okay, you can just send me an email. All right, cool, good. Okay, so where is STB used? Again, it's actually used in political elections. It sounds a bit complicated, but it's actually used in political elections in North America, in Australia, in Papua New Guinea, also in Ireland. Interestingly. Here's a more blockbuster application of STB. It's used in Oscars, in Academy Awards. So the way you decide the best picture, it's by using STB from the Academy members. Who knew? And okay, so anyone recognizes that? Parliament? Rashtrapati Bhavan, exactly. So the reason I'm showing this picture is because the President of India is also elected using a slight variant of STB, right, where the members of Parliament and members of Legislative Assemblies votes are pooled together. They are weighed slightly differently, so MPs have a slightly higher weight, but again, morally it's just STB. Okay, so it's a very high profile voting. All right. So what is bad about STB is that it fails a very natural property called monotonicity, which says the following. So suppose I am a candidate, okay, and currently I am winning the election based on the current preferences of the voters. Okay. Now let's say some voter, let's say I am not the first guy in that voter's preferences, I am say third or fourth. That voter says, hey, look, you are winning, I'll just promote you to my top position. Right? That should not hurt me, right? My support is only growing. But turns out that it can hurt you under STB. So if you are a winner and your support improves, sometimes you can lose under STB. Which sounds bizarre, but let me give you an example. So the same example that I showed you before, there the STB winner was red, remember? Yeah? Okay. Now let's say these voters here, these two voters, they say, look, red is already winning, let us promote red to a higher position. Okay? So let's say they vote like that. Okay? Now let's run STB on this new election. Okay? Alright. So what do we do now? We remove yellow because it still has the smallest support, right? Okay, then what? Okay, so first of all, let me just do a cosmetic change. Because these rankings now become the same, let me just merge them and call them 5. Okay, nothing has changed, just sort of made it more compact. Okay, now what? Remove yellow, okay, if you say so. Now what? Remove blue. And hopefully you already start to see a difference. Right? Last time we removed green. Right? But because of this change in the voters' rankings, that has now flipped the order of removal of candidates. Right? So this time we'll actually remove blue. Now that leaves us with red and green, and if you stare at it for a second, you'll see that green has a majority support over red. Right? So, is it clear?
Can we go to that first slide where we had, why did we remove
I'm just claiming that suppose red is winning, there exist scenarios where even if you increase the support of the current winner, it might actually stop being the winner. It might lose the election if you increase its support, which is weird.
earlier we had removed green, now we removed blue.
Everyone happy with what's happening here? Okay. So this very natural property, it's called monotonicity. Turns out STB does not satisfy it. So next time you're not happy with the president, you can do that. All right. Here's a more interesting and I guess the most real world example of strategic behavior. Okay. So this is data from the Olympic host elections. This was about which city will host Olympics in 2016. Okay. They did some pre-processing and then they narrowed down on 4 names: Rio, Madrid, Tokyo, and Chicago. Okay. And then the committee votes that which city should be elected. Okay. And again, as you can see, this was a multi-round system, round 1, round 2, round 3. Okay. So something interesting happened here, right? So these numbers that you see here, these are how many voters declared that city as their top choice. Okay, how many people supported that city in the first round, second round, third round. So look at these 2 cells here. In the first round, Tokyo had 22 people who thought it was the best. Then Chicago got eliminated. And now it had fewer people who think it is the best. Okay? So that is very interesting. This seems suggestive of strategic behavior. Okay? I'm not claiming that's what is happening here, but there is reason to suspect. And the reason, what may be happening here is the following. Maybe you are not happy with Chicago, so you want to take support away from Chicago, but maybe your favorite city is, you're not sure about it winning either. So you say, okay, let me support Tokyo for now, so that Tokyo will knock off Chicago. And once Chicago is knocked off, I can go back and support my favorite city. This could be something that is happening here, one can't be sure, but I just want to bring it up because in the multi-stage elections in the real world, strategic behavior is a real concern. Okay, it's not just a theoretical property that economists have made up, it's a very real concern, and it's a very crucial election, right? Which city gets to host Olympics, it's monetarily a big deal, and also otherwise it's a very big deal. So this can matter, this can have consequences. This is not exactly a STV, but it is a multi-round rule. So they just look at in every round which city has the highest support, knock off the one with the lowest support, then in the remaining candidates you knock off the lowest support one and so on. They vote again, exactly. It's not transferable, that's the point, exactly.
But votes are also more than
Yes, so sometimes people can abstain and then come back. So you see here, eligible members, because I think, I don't know the rules completely, but like there are people who can vote in first round, not in the second round and all those things. In the final round, I think the speaker has some additional contributing vote and so on. So there's all those rules there. But
yeah. There can be that noise also.
Yeah, there can be noise from here as well, absolutely. But yeah, there is a reason to be suspicious, is all I'm saying. Yeah. All right. Okay. So I hope everyone now thinks manipulation is important enough to study. Okay, it's not something that I've made up. Okay, all right. So next I want to talk about pairwise comparisons. Okay. And when you speak of pairwise comparisons, there's one name that you should know, which is Nicolas de Condorcet. If you are paying attention to the years, you'll notice that he was a contemporary of Borda. Okay, and turns out he was not the best of friends with Borda. Okay, so they had a tussle going on. Anyway, he was also like Borda. He was also a very smart dude. He did math. Okay, he was a philosopher, and most importantly, he was an advocate for equality, gender equality, racial equality, and various other social concerns. Okay, so he was very vocal about it. And he also proposed a criterion for voting, which was based on these pairwise comparisons. And here it is. So the criterion was the following. Suppose there is a candidate who beats every other candidate in a head-to-head election, meaning you consider candidate A, candidate B. If more than 50% of the voters think A is better than B, then A beats B. Okay? You look at all such pairs. If there is one candidate that beats all other candidates in such head-to-head elections, seems natural to elect it. Right? It's better than anyone else, and is supported by a majority of voters. Okay? So, for example, if you have an instance like that, okay, then if you look at red versus blue, so 4 voters, 3 here and 1 here, they prefer red over blue, and 1 prefers blue over red. Okay, so red beats blue 4-1, so it wins this pairwise battle. Okay, and likewise you can look at all other pairwise comparisons. You can draw this graph. Okay, and if it so happens that there exists a candidate, in this case red, who beats every other candidate, it's called a Condorcet winner. Okay, somebody that wins all of its pairwise head-to-heads. Okay, and Condorcet criterion is a property of voting rules which says that whenever a Condorcet winner exists on an input, and note that it must be unique, the voting rule must pick that. Okay, if it does not exist, then we don't know, but whenever it exists, then you must pick it. That's the Condorcet property. Okay. Alright, but there's obviously a problem that I'm sure you all would have seen, is that a Condorcet winner may not always exist, even on very simple instances. So suppose you have rankings like that, if you just tally up all the head-to-heads, you see that there's a cycle. Yeah, is the question?
All of these are kings.
Oh yeah, we'll not go into kings today. I think talk all the fancy graph theory with Jatin offline, okay? But for now, we'll just talk about Condorcet criterion, okay? So a Condorcet winner may not always exist, even on very, very simple instances, okay? And this phenomenon is called the Condorcet paradox. Why is it a paradox? Well, it's a paradox because if you look at the individual voters, they have perfectly nice rankings of all three candidates. They have perfectly rational preferences. Every individual is perfectly rational, right? But the society as a whole cannot make up its mind. Society is irrational, right? So the paradox says that rational preferences among individuals may not translate to rational preference at the level of a society. Okay? And in some sense, this is really what makes voting interesting. Okay? If such an uncontroversial winner, such as a Condorcet winner, always existed, I think there will be little debate against, not picking it. So, really, I think this is what makes this whole exercise worth doing. Okay? Everyone happy? Condorcet criterion, Condorcet paradox? Okay, cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 more voting rules that are based on these kind of pairwise head-to-heads. Okay? And I'm sure you'll like at least one of them. Alright. So the 5th voting rule is called the Copeland voting rule. Anyone heard of this name? Okay, I'm disappointed. Do people not follow sports? You do follow sports? Okay. Anything that comes up on television, cricket, football, chess, whatever. Okay. Hopefully when you see this rule, a bell should sort of go in your head. Okay, so here's how Copeland works. It looks at head-to-head elections, okay, between pairs of candidates. Now, a candidate, if it wins that pairwise head-to-head, it gets 1 point. If it loses, it gets 0 points. And if there's equal number of voters who prefer either candidate, then you split the point. You do half and half. Okay? So, for example, you have this kind of an instance. Okay, again, these numbers denote the number of voters. Okay? If you're comparing red with blue, or red with purple, sorry, then this and this is where red beats purple. So 3 plus 1 plus 1, 5, right? It's 5 versus 8, right? So this pairwise comparison, purple beats red. So purple gets 1 point and red gets 0 points. Okay? Now you move to some other pair of candidates, red and green. So what's happening here is that all these guys, so 4, 5 and 9 versus 4. Okay, so red beats green, so red gets 1 point, green gets nothing, and so on and so on. You do it for all pairs of candidates. Okay, you add the points and the candidate with the maximum score is the Copeland winner. Again, modulo tie breaking. Okay. Now does it seem familiar?
I just wanted to add that if there are no ties, this is exactly the same. This will be a bingo. This will be the highest degree vertex, which is always a bingo.
Yes, exactly. So this is very much related to picking high degree vertices in a. If you think of it as a graph, right? This is exactly picking the vertices based on the degrees. Good. So in this case, purple is the winner. Why? Because it gets 1 from here, 1 from here, 1 from here, 3 points. And red gets 2, yellow gets 1, and green gets nothing. That's why purple is the Copeland winner. Nice and easy. Like I said, it has many applications. Okay, so either Copeland rule or things resembling Copeland rule are used in all sorts of sports settings. Okay. So for example, I don't know, I think a lot of people watch IPL for some reason. So you can think of a match between 2 teams as an election, right? And if one team wins, it gets 2 points in IPL, the loser gets 0, and if it's a draw or called off because of weather or whatever, then it's the 1 point is split.
There's only one voter.
Yeah, so I'm not saying it is exactly an election, I'm saying it resembles the Copeland election. Okay. So in Premier League, I think the scoring system is 3 points for a win, nothing if you lose, and 1 if you draw. So it's not exactly Copeland, but something again that resembles this kind of pairwise scoring, and then a bunch of other things. All right. So what is the issue with Copeland? Turns out Copeland sometimes reward you to not go to the voting booth and stay at home. So it's good advice during COVID times, but not in general. But here's the problem, okay? So suppose you have, again, this instance, and this is just the thing that we saw, right? You have these pairwise comparisons, Copeland is the winner. Purple is the winner. Now, these three voters here, for them, the second favorite candidate is the current Copeland winner, right? Now, they are thinking whether they should go to the polling booth or not, right? They're saying, okay, let's not even cast our votes. Let's just stay at home. Okay? So they don't show up. Now you just do an election with these voters, and lo and behold, red ends up being the winner. Okay, this is something that you can go back and check. But why is this a bad thing? Well, it's a bad thing because these voters, by not voting, they are able to get someone better elected according to their true preference. Which is very undemocratic, right? You want people to vote. That's the whole point of doing voting, right? You want to see their preferences, you want to aggregate their preferences. So a voting rule should not incentivize people to not show up, right? Yes?
How did this happen? Like, what is the
just running Copeland.
Like, what is the insight of why would this happen?
Blue is able to beat yellow and green because of these three voters. Okay. Blue gets more points.
Sure, you want to explain? Go ahead. Yes.
Like blue gets more points because it is able to beat yellow and green because there are three voters.
Exactly. So blue was getting a lot of score because it was placed above yellow and green. You took away that luxury, right? And the rest of the votes are not as friendly to blue. So I mean, ultimately we're just running Copeland. So
demoting blue could also have worked.
Pardon me?
Demoting blue could have worked.
Demoting blue could have worked. Yeah, I guess.
That is also a benefit.
Yeah, but right, but in particular, if you don't count these votes, then also red can be made to win. Okay. Yeah, to demote blue, these voters would have to get up and come to the polling booth. I don't want that. Okay. All right. Cool. So this is an issue, right? People should show up, and they don't in case of Copeland. They may not in case of Copeland. Okay. So it is what it is, you know. So the final rule I want to talk about, again, it's based on pairwise comparisons. It's called the Schulze rule, and hopefully this is the rule that, as you know, computer science or math students, you would like the most, because it has the most complicated definition and it involves graphs. Okay, so this is like the nerd rule. Okay, all right. So very succinctly, the winner in Schulze is someone who quote-unquote chain beats every other candidate in a pairwise comparison graph. This term may not make much sense, so let me explain it step by step. So the input to Schulze is again something like this. Yeah, bunch of rankings. What this rule does is it's going to construct this kind of a matrix of pairwise comparisons. So the rows and the columns are all the candidates. Now every entry in this matrix, it's going to look at how many voters, let's say you're looking at purple versus red cell here, how many voters prefer purple over red, minus how many voters prefer red over purple. It looks at that difference. Okay? So these are the voters who think purple is better than red, right? These guys, and those guys, 2, 4, 4, 3, and minus the number of voters who think the opposite. So these guys. Yeah? So you just create this entire matrix in that way, this pairwise comparison matrix. Okay? Right, so in this case the number is 5, you just populate it. Note that the diagonal entries would obviously be 0, and this would be a skew symmetric matrix. So the transposed entries are negatives of each other by definition. Okay, cool. So let me throw away the rankings. What I really need is just this pairwise comparison data. Okay, and using that I'm going to draw a graph. So imagine a graph where the vertices are these candidates. Okay, and now you draw edges with weights. What are the weights? Those are exactly the numbers over there. Okay, so for example, purple, red. So purple beats red by +5, so I draw an edge from purple to red with a weight of 5, and in the opposite direction there is, you can imagine that there is a -5 edge in the opposite direction. I have not drawn it because that would mess up the picture. Okay, but that edge is there. Okay? Likewise, I draw edges between all pairs of candidates. Okay? These are weighted edges, weighted and directed. Okay? Everyone happy how we drew this graph? Any questions? Okay. Cool. So Schulze really operates on this graph. Okay. All right. So now we are going to define. So now we are going to look at pairs of candidates in this graph, and we are going to look at paths between them, and we are going to look at how strong these paths are. So the strength of a path. So a path is something like you start from, let's say, green to yellow to blue. So this is a path. Okay. And all sorts of things. So the strength of a path, or if you want to call it a chain, is the weight of the weakest edge or weakest link on that path. Yes?
Can you explain one of the edge, like what does that mean?
It means how many voters prefer, so let's say you look at this.
Okay.
So this number means how many voters prefer yellow over purple minus how many people prefer purple over yellow.
Okay.
The difference.
People prefer yellow over blue, that's the like positive edge.
Minus the number who prefer in the opposite direction. That's the difference. Okay. So a large number means a lot of people prefer you over the other person. Okay. And again, like I said, so there is a negative 17 edge in the opposite direction, which are not drawn here, but it exists. Okay. Cool. So so in this graph, you look at any path, and the strength of that path is the weight of the weakest or the smallest number on that path. Okay, so a path is only as strong as the weakest edge in it. Okay? For example, let's look at red and green. Okay, so these two things here. Now, can you tell me among all the paths from red to green, which is the strongest path?
There is one.
Sorry?
There is only one path.
There's only one path, thankfully, yes. So this is one path, and this is the only path because the other edges are incoming. So the weights would be negative if you go outwards. So no point considering those, right, if you have a positive weight. So, and on this path, this is the only edge, and therefore the strength of this path is 7. Okay? So this is the strongest path from red to green. Okay?
If you have no path, then you would consider that negative edge.
Yes. So like I said, the negative edges are there. So there is path either way. But we are just not drawing it because it makes it very complicated. Alright. What about the opposite direction? So what is the strongest path from green to red? Green, blue, red. Why? So this is a path definitely. What is its strength? 5, right? Between 5 and 9, this is the weaker edge. So this determines the strength of the entire path. So this is 5. Any other paths? Through yellow. Okay, so this and that. But this seems a weaker path because its strength is 1, right? Between 1 and 3, 1 is smaller. So the strength of this path is 1. It's not as strong as the strength 5 path. Anything else?
Going through 3 can only give you a weaker path than 5, right? So
Exactly. So there's another path. You go from green to yellow to purple to red, but it has a 3 weightage, so its strength cannot be more than 3. So this has got to be the strongest path. Okay.
Green to red is also a path, right? Like a minus 7.
Yeah. So then it's not a there is a path absolutely, but it is negative, so we're just not even talking about it. Exactly. Okay. So it's clear how you determine strengths of paths between any pair of candidates. Cool. All right. So here's the kicker. So let's define a relation between pairs of candidates. So I'm going to say A chain beats B. So chain beats I'm denoting by this double greater than sign. Okay. So it means A beats B in some special sense. What is that sense? If the strongest path from A to B in this graph is stronger than the strongest path from B to A. Okay, so pick any pair of candidates, look at the strongest path in one direction and look at the strongest path in the other direction. Whichever is stronger, you call that candidate as the winner of that pairwise head to head. Okay, you say that A chain beats B. It's not beats, it's chain beats. Chain beats in the sense of this path business. Okay, so it's a bit of a mind bender. It takes a second to sink in. Okay, so let's do a few examples.
Strictly stronger.
Good point. I'll come to that in a second. Yeah. Let's look at red and green, and I claim that red chain beats green as per this definition. Why? So the strongest path from red to green, we agreed that it was 7. Yeah, and the strongest path from green to red was this one. Its strength was 5. So the strongest path from red to green is stronger, which means red chain beats green. That's the sense in which I define chain beats. Okay? Cool. So let me draw a different graph of chain beats relations. Okay, so I'm saying because we have proved that red chain beats green, so I'll draw like a double greater than sign on this arrow. Okay, so I'll collect the chain beats information on this smaller graph here. Alright, let's do one more pair, it's fun. So red versus purple. Okay, so what is the strongest path from red to purple?
3 7.
No, you have to give me the colors.
Red, green, blue.
Red, green, purple. Right? Anything else? So this has 7 is the smallest, its strength is 7. Anything else? You can't go this way and you can't go that way. So you have to go this way. After that you could go this way and then that way, but then you hit a 3, which is smaller. So you don't want to go that way. Right? Cool. What about the other direction? So strongest path from purple to red. I definitely see a 5. Anything else? No, because everything else is incoming. Cool. Right? So because the strongest path from red to purple, 7, is stronger than strongest path from purple to red, we say that red chain beats purple. Okay? And note that chain beats is different from pairwise beats, because in this graph, purple beats red, but red chain beats purple. Okay? And this is happening because of this somewhat more involved graph structure. So although more voters prefer purple in a pairwise way, but when you look at the aggregate preferences, in this sense, red is better. Okay? Alright. So everyone comfortable with how you calculate chain beats? Okay. So now we're just going to populate this little graph here. Okay, so who chain beats whom, we'll capture this information. Okay. Okay. Turns out that if you spend enough time on this, yellow happens to chain beat everybody else. Okay. And trust me on that. If you don't trust me, you can do the calculations offline. Now, because it chain beats everyone else, Schulze says that should be the Schulze winner. Okay. So such a candidate happened to exist in this example, right? Why does a Schulze winner always exist, no matter what kind of preferences you give?
I have one doubt.
Yes.
Is this strictly stronger or just stronger?
Yeah. So absolutely. So if it is stronger, then it would be a partial order. If it is at least as strong as, then you'll have some tie breaking to do. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm just calling it stronger just to keep things clean. But you're right.
Tie breaking would also have to be in such a way that there always exists one winner.
So tie breaking is among the people. It will be among the chain beats winners. So if there are multiple people who are not chain beaten by anyone, you pick from among them. Right? So once you draw this graph, if there are multiple people who qualify as Schulze, you just pick one from them. So that would be the relation. Yeah, but you're right. I should be saying at least as strong as to guarantee existence, but I'm just saying stronger just to keep things a bit clean. Good, right? So in this example, yellow is the Schulze winner because it chain beats everybody else. Okay? Alright.
Now, isn't that just defined because among all the incoming edges, that yellow has the incoming edge of 3. So that was like the bottleneck for all these chains.
Well, I mean, in this example, it seems to be that, but if you have a million candidates and the graph is very complex, then you can't just look at my neighboring edges. You have to look at all edges, because the strength may be determined by edges that are far away from you.
So what I was suggesting in this graph, the deciding factor was among yellow and green, who won and by like how much?
What do you mean deciding factor? I'm not sure. For what?
Since the difference between votes for yellow and green were such a small quantity.
Okay.
So whenever that case happens and yellow has beat everyone else.
It has chain beats. It chain beats everyone else.
Even except green, everyone other than green.
Okay.
In that above graph. So because of that, that yellow versus green match, the difference was so small that everybody who wants to like chain beat yellow has to go through that 3 value, and that's why nobody could.
I mean, sure. Okay, so like I said, this is a small enough example where the 3 edge you have to carry through it. I mean, you have to go through it a lot of times. But if you have many other candidates, right, then it's not so clear whether you can fixate on a particular pair, because this guy could have a million neighbors, right? Then I'm not sure how well this intuition carries forward in that setting. Sure, in this example you can see that you have to traverse this edge and it lowers the strength. That is why something happens, but I'm not sure how robust that intuition is in general. But I don't want to comment on that. Yeah.
In case of like no ties, like just stronger and weak, like get no ties in the individual voting between two things, is the lower graph a DAG?
Is this graph a DAG? Yes, good. Yes, it is a DAG, of course. Can you say why it is? It's transitive, exactly. Yeah. So this is something that I was planning to give as an exercise, but thanks for mentioning it. So this chain beats relation happens to be transitive. So if A chain beats B and B chain beats C, then A chain beats C.
So for the stronger conditions, if you say something like if you want to incorporate tie breaking, and if you do it something like coin flips, then you might not get a transitivity relationship or tag break.
So the tie breaking is happening here, not in voters' preferences.
No, but if you get a tie in the voters' preferences, then like you don't. That's just a zero.
Yeah, so I mean, there could be ties in voters' preferences. We are not considering that today. I think the question, if I understood correctly, was what if there are multiple people who qualify to be Schulze winner here?
No, as in like if you A greater than B is like not decidable. It's like both have a.
Okay, I see. Yeah, okay.
So if you decide it based on a coin flip, then it might not get that.
Oh, in that case, I don't draw the edge. So I'm not saying it's a complete graph.
Okay.
It will be a partial order.
Okay.
Yeah. So to make the graph complete, I have to go back to the suggestion that Jatin was making, which is that, okay, let's say it is at least as strong as, but then in that case, there might be multiple such Schulze winners, so I have to pick one, and the usual thing happens, right? So there's multiple, so just like in scoring, in the scoring based voting rules, multiple candidates with the same score, you have to figure out who wins. Something similar happens here, right? Multiple eligible people, who do you pick? Well, use some tie-breaking rule. So it depends on which formulation you use. In this example, I'm using the stronger one, but really I should be using the at least as strong as.
In at least as strong, you can't say that it's a DAG. I think like in at least as strong.
It would be a multi-graph, and you'll pick the agents who don't lose.
To any, but there will be agents who lose to some people. It might not be a DAG, so there will be might be a cycle, and it's not necessary that there exists a source that.
Okay, let's maybe take this discussion offline. Okay, I mean it's a sort of a technicality that I don't want to get into at this stage, but happy to discuss it maybe after the class. Okay, but hopefully other parts of Schulze are clear, right? Okay, yeah.
If the chain beats is transitive, and then we are also saying that since it's transitive, we have a DAG. So since we have a DAG, can we say that there will always be a Schulze winner?
Yes, that's exactly what we're claiming. So to prove that it always exists, you have to show transitivity, which is exercise. Okay. All right. Okay.
Why did we take the difference? Like you could also have done that from red to blue to purple to red are the number of people that prefer purple over red, and then red to purple was the number of people that prefer red over purple. And
You could do that, yeah, sure. Can you guarantee existence of a winner?
What's the motive? Basically, you guarantee existence. That's why.
Yeah, and okay, so the motivation, like, okay, so I mean, this rule is very graph theoretic, right? What is the English definition of this rule? So it's hard to sort of articulate in words, but what you could say is that if you're comparing two candidates, right, you're looking at the worst support when this candidate beats someone else, and that candidate beats someone else, and that candidate beats someone else. So the worst support in one direction outperforms the worst support in the other direction. That's sort of the idea. Okay, you don't just look at the direct comparisons, you look at comparisons through all the other candidates. Okay, that's sort of a very hand-wavy interpretation, but I also find it hard to really grasp the explain this rule in like just one sentence, and I think it's very hard to explain in general. There is a ton of guarantees. I can point you to a 100-page paper which just gives guarantees about Schulze rule. It is a very good rule. Lots of nice properties. Just send me an email. I'll share the pointer with you. Yeah, it's very well studied and lots of good things about it. Yes.
What Devyan said, like if you have edges with the actual number of votes of red over blue,
instead of taking the differences.
Then choosing longer paths will give you an advantage. And then always the longer paths will end up with higher values.
Longer.
Just considering the minimum, right? Not
the weakest, smallest number,
Okay, then, there's nothing we can say.
Alright. So, because Schulze is such a complicated rule, it's used in nerd circles. Okay, so it's used in operating systems, Ubuntu, Debian, Gentoo. It's used in engineering societies, IEEE, ACM, which is the computer science body. It's used on top coder, and interestingly, MTV at some point used Schulze rule to determine which music videos to show. Who knew? You might notice that no political elections use Schulze. I'll let you figure out why that is.
Why did Ubuntu and Debian use it?
Again, because like what features to implement, what updates to make, they use that kind of voting in the internal. Also, some of these, I don't know which one, but in one of these things, who is on the council, the decision-making council, is determined using Schulze rule. So the internal voting happens using Schulze. I forgot which one, sorry, don't remember. But there's a wiki article on Schulze, if you can check it out, there's a lot of applications there. Alright, so here's a question that has been haunting us, okay, from the beginning, like which voting rule is the best, right? We have seen a whole basket of rules. So this question was put up to experts in the area, okay, in 2010, there was a workshop on social choice, and they asked, okay, you guys think you know nothing or two about voting, then tell us which. You see the problem here already, right? Okay, I have some results to show. So these are legit like social choice experts, and they were asked this question, okay? What is the best voting rule for your town to use to elect the mayor, which is just a sort of complicated way of asking, okay, which voting rule do you think is the best, okay? So here are the results. So there's something called approval voting, right? I didn't discuss it, but the way it works is you get a list of candidates and you just tick mark whichever candidate you like. It's a like-dislike voting rule, and the candidate with the most likes wins. Okay, very simple. STP we have already seen, it gets a pretty high score.
In approval there is no preference.
Pardon me?
In approval there is no preference, it's just binary.
Yeah, it's not rankings, it's approvals, yeah.
Ironically, this is a plurality based graph.
You'll see that. So, yeah, so STP we have seen, Copeland we have seen. Kemeny is a rule that we will see in a couple of lectures. This rule actually doesn't give you just a winning candidate, it gives you a ranking over winning candidates. So it maps a bunch of rankings to a ranking over candidates. Borda we have seen in Plurality, as you can see, no one likes Plurality. Okay, exactly 0 favors. The irony here is that they used approval voting to come up with this data. Now you can question the self-selecting nature of this experiment. I won't comment on it further, but I hope you see the issue here. Okay. All right. Okay. So I just want to finish with one example. It's the awesome example. Why is it awesome? Because on this example, all the different rules that we have seen so far, they happen to give different outcomes. Okay? So all of these rules, we at least vaguely agreed that they're all reasonable in some sense. Right? Plurality, Borda, Runoff rules, Condorcet, STV, etc. They all seem reasonable. But on this particular instance, if you do the math, turns out they all give different outcomes. Okay? So which rule is right? It's not clear a priori.
By Condorcet, do you mean like there is unique Condorcet?
Yes, there is a Condorcet winner, and there is like these two rules, they are Condorcet consistent, meaning whenever a Condorcet winner exists, which must be unique, they always pick it. And it should make sense because they look at these pairwise comparisons, right? So if you are a Condorcet winner, your Copeland score will be the highest, right? You get 1 point for everything. Yeah, and Schulze is also easy to see, but yeah. Interesting, huh? So this is, and things like this make the voting problem very interesting because all of these reasonable suggestions, they all give you different answers. Now what is the right way to pick an answer? Because voting is very important in our lives. We have seen countless applications already. How do you make decisions? Right? What is the right way to make decisions? Whichever voting rule you use, it has some issues. Right? So how do you even select the best voting rule? It's not clear, and we'll try to answer that question in the coming lectures. So in the next lecture, we are going to talk a lot about manipulation and strategizing in voting. Okay, so check out for that. For now, let's do a quiz. All right.